Spoken Naval.
Hi guys, again, live from Spoken Naval, back at the cafe at St Peter's Square tonight, my favourite place. Always like coming into podcasts, and I've got another writer with me today. Now, I haven't met this young lady before, but a few people have been recommending her to me recently, so that's always good when I'm doing podcasts. Both with my friend Steve Smythe. Now, I'll let Emily introduce herself in a minute, but I've certainly been following your work now for a couple of years, and I've always been enjoying it. So, Emily, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody? Tell them where you're from. And your case, because you don't just do creative writing, you do a lot of blogging and articles, where all your creativity originally came from.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Andy. So my name's Emily Oldfield. I am a poet, and I have my first pamphlet, my debut pamphlet, Grit, coming out on the 1st of March on Poetry Salzburg, which I still can't believe. It's really exciting.
I'm pleased for that. How did you find this place? Get a hold of this label then.
Poetry Salzburg. I had a very influential former tutor and colleague at Manchester Metropolitan University, where I went and did my English degree a couple of years ago now. Martin Kratz, and he wrote a pamphlet.
I'm due to meet him shortly.
Yeah, he's brilliant, and he's been really significantly involved in setting up the poetry library here in Manchester.
I've got a meeting coming up with him shortly, actually. So
yeah,
we'll talk about off mic.
Martin's brilliant, and he had a pamphlet published called A Skeleton's Progress, and that's on Poetry Salzburg, and I went to the launch of that at Sandbar. This was a few years ago now, I think, and I became much more aware of the publisher and the design of the pamphlets, and I've got talking to some poets involved on that press, and met my editor Keith Hudson, who is a brilliant poet. He writes.
Just met Keith, actually. Somebody I know.
Yeah,
actually.
Keith is fantastic.
It's a small world.
Keith's been my editor, and he's just such an inspiring person with his stories of like writing Coronation Street and for comedians, and his poetry has a real kind of personal emphasis about it. It's the stories of people, of communities, of music halls, and my poetry is the story, not the story of community, but accounts of community, but a more rural community, accounts of like place in Rosendale where I'm from.
Yeah, you said before that's where your book's called Grit, isn't it?
Yes.
It's kind of touching all about that, isn't it? So.
Yes, Rosendale is, I think it's almost like a bit of a forgotten or a neglected borderland, even though it doesn't deserve to be treated like that at all, because it's in Lancashire. It's kind of on the edge of Greater Manchester, just on the edge of Rochdale. It falls out of Pendle, and it's just there, this little pocket, but there's some fascinating like moorland around there, and the locality is just so striking in its gritstone. And I think the poems are written, a lot of the poems in the pamphlet take the names from place names, from like settlement names like Bacup, Britannia. Britannia's such a weird name for a village.
I never got my head around that way. Well, they actually called it Britannia.
Britannia.
I know I went down there once, and I told you before of Mike, and I went to go Bacup a bit. So.
And just the name and Bacup, and they are some of them are quite strange names. Waterfoot, Rottenstall, so I based them in place, and. And so the Grit title kind of evokes that.
Yeah. Was it quite a long process writing these poems for yourself?
It's quite strange, really. A lot of the poems were written, and the poems took me by surprise, and I'm a great advocate that sometimes the best creative writing you can do takes you by surprise. It isn't necessarily planned, it suddenly comes about.
Oh, it sneaks up is a word I always use. Yeah, so I've done that before.
And it was written at quite a strange time of my life, because largely last year, my granddad was dying of cancer.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he was a massive influence on me. And I'd spend a lot of time at my grandma and granddad's house, where I was, I'd spent a lot of my childhood as well. But now it's like as an adult, still being there in Rosendale, in Waterfoot.
Yeah, of course.
And so I was really closely involved in place, and I was there a lot of time, spending a lot of time with my granddad, who was getting quite poorly. And so I'd often be awake at like 5 a.m, and I just suddenly had these poems that needed to be written. And it's not like I had sat there and thought, right, I'm going to use this time to write poetry, but I did. And I know that my granddad really liked me. He loved the poetry, and that meant a lot to me.
Is your family quite creative then, aren't they?
They are. my dad has been a big influence in my poetry, kind of like my tastes, and he often had like books of poetry, knocking around when I was little, and he used to read. When my dad used to read poetry to me, he used to read a lot of kind of rhythmic poems. So have you is it Robert Louis Stevenson? It's from a railway carriage.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like faster than fairies, faster than witches, bridges and houses, hedges and ditches. And I remember that so strongly from being a kid. And that kind of, so my poem has my approach to poetry, there often is a kind of like rhythmic element to it. I really care about the place that I'm writing about and the flow of the environment around me.
Yeah. So I've said before, so it comes from you've been writing all your life, then pretty one way or another, haven't you?
I guess so. And my dad's a writer, but he writes more. At the moment, he writes more kind of non-fiction about place, and he's written about the Yorkshire Dales.
Oh, cool. So I know, obviously, like as well as a poet, you're currently doing the project The Haunt, aren't you?
Yes.
Where did that come from then?
Haunt has been a creation of Manchester Metropolitan University, where I studied my degree in English, and I loved it. It's been, I've never left because I went to do my degree, and then I got the job there as I finished, which was amazing.
Oh, that's lucky, isn't it?
Yeah, and because Manchester, and I hope like more and more people are aware of this, it has the biggest centre for Gothic studies, one of the biggest in the world.
I wasn't aware of that until you started writing about it for Haunt, that's why. So. And
Haunt has been created to celebrate the work of that centre, and it's a subsection of Visit Manchester, so the tourism board for the city. And you can go on Visit Manchester, and then it's a subsection of there, and we celebrate everything alternative, unusual, Gothic, underground in Manchester, and hidden histories in particular, and that's what I write about, and that's my job.
How's a normal day on that then for you then?
There is no such thing as a normal day.
It's not a normal job really, I suppose, is it?
No, especially when I have a taxidermy crow on my desk on a sheep's skull, yes, that was given to me instead of a bunch of flowers when I was giving a speech by my boss Helen. And Helen Darby's also a poet.
Yeah, I've met Helen a couple of times. I've not seen her for a while, but I have met her 2 or 3 times.
Helen's brilliant, and really helped shape my work as well in what she's been doing. And and with Haunt, so say a day could be anything from writing a review of an alternative cultural event in the morning, to interviewing somebody involved in the city's cultural scene, to go and visiting a music venue or an old pub or even a library like this, and looking at the history behind the building. So I've done the hidden history of like the Deaf Institute, the King's Arms,
I know both
Eagle,
them venues.
Looking back into because it's easy to just go and visit them as venues, but like, what about the history? What's happened there? So
I grew up myself like that. I've got big history in like the Waterfoot Theatre in Stretford.
Yeah, brilliant.
That's an old theatre. It's been shut since the 80s themselves. There's so much history in places like that.
And that you walk past every day and don't realise, like All Saints Park, which many people will pass every day at the side of Oxford Road. There's more than 16,000 bodies underneath it.
I've heard that one, yeah.
It's a former cemetery, and there's former cemeteries scattered all around the city, Victorian burial grounds.
Yeah, I didn't know about the Manchester Victoria train station. It's got a big cemetery underneath that.
Yeah.
Until I found that one out the other year myself. You look round, it's fascinating what you can find.
And there's so many layers to the city, so that's an exciting thing, because with Haunt, it's rather than keep peddling the same cultural narrative of Manchester, of like say Manchester music and football, and Manchester's got great culture and that exists obviously. Like I love that music too, in moderation, but I also like the weird stuff.
Yeah, I know. It's when you mentioned about Andy Weatherall on Facebook yesterday, which I did, and it was a massive influence on me.
Gutted, and he was an amazing influence, and it's like cultural figures like that dared to be different, and I think I suppose his legacy is that he inspires that to continue today, and there's lots of big supporters of his here in Manchester.
Yeah, awesome, completely. And also, Manchester's got so many people out there in the past and the history, haven't they? So made influence in the way they are, everything. So completely. So, do you find since you started work on the Haunt, just over 18 months ago, has your actual writing changed much?
Well,
about your poetry.
That's an interesting question, because I suppose with Haunt it is kind of cultural journalism, but I think the focus on topics that are like hidden histories and like the unusual and like the more slightly more abstract and gothic, I think it's made my poetry perhaps tap into that kind of hidden aspect a bit more, so to look beyond the surface of place. It's places in particular that I write about, and I've also been writing about Winter Hill.
Yeah, I've been following that. I've got a friend that used to live in the flats near there.
Oh wow!
That was like, I remember the snow coming down there a few times. Well, that's got bitterly cold on there. It is. And
that's an external project that I'm doing on Winter Hill, but I think writing on Haunt, it has made my poetry perhaps more, I wouldn't say bleak, definitely not bleak, but perhaps more looking at the undercovered aspects and what's hidden underneath.
I've always been interested in Tangle Hill, which I was told your old neck of the woods in Rochdale as well.
Oh yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I've got a story about it. I'll tell you off mic later about that. I can't read on here.
Okay.
My family don't know about that.
All right, I'm intrigued. Okay.
Well, obviously, like yourself, I know you said you've obviously been you've done all kinds of writing current affairs as well, haven't you? So, how did you end up writing for The Guardian at one point?
This was a really interesting and kind of bizarre occurrence, because my dad was a primary school head teacher, and a lot of family involved in primary schools, and obviously I'm passionate about education, and it's been sad to see teachers really struggling under stress, especially in recent times. But this was a fair few years ago now, and there was a news article in The Guardian about there was an outcry because they were cutting playtime for schools, for primary schools.
Oh yeah.
And I retweeted that article and said, it's such a shame play is so important, for primary school children. I think that imagination, as most, especially poets, how valuable the imagination is and being able to be free. And
my first poem I wrote was 10.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Like I said, I'm 47 now, so what you do is encouraging people at early age, they never stop.
And to be free and to have that play as well is really important. So I commented just on Twitter about it, saying playtime's really important, and then The Guardian, a journalist got in touch and said, would you like to perhaps blog about it for our education section?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay. So I put together an article about why I was against the cutting of playtime for children and how important play is for children. So it was so different than what I would typically write, but I think it was a real good challenge and to do that.
Completely. Also as well, I noticed as well you've done some work with the Manchester record store, Sound Waves Here We Come.
Yes, that was a brilliant experience. I guess music has always been a big influence on me, and not just the music itself is fascinating. I like the kind of often the weird and the abstract and the underground, which has helped, like I say, with Haunt. It kind of informs what I'm doing there too. But Sound Waves was a shop in Affleck's, the famous Affleck's Palace.
That's where I'm going next.
Which so many people love. And it was owned by Alex Lee, who became a really good friend of mine, and he's sadly no longer there, the record store, because he moved away, but he still kept the store going, and it's online as well. But then I worked some shifts there, just selling records and the stories that you hear from people, and so many people would come in and some would just talk to you, and some people would be really keen about the music and tell you their own stories or try and sell you vinyl and stuff.
I know I'm like that when I go to record shops. I'm like that.
No, but it's great, and it was a fascinating place. And Alex said to me he was hoping to write a novel consisting of various, accounts of the people that had come in.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that'd be fascinating. So, and I really, and I was involved in some record labels, some Manchester record labels when I first moved here, Valentine Records and Analog Trash. And both of those Manchester independent labels that are brilliant labels, and they've been a bit like a family to me since I moved here. So I'm very grateful to the music scene as well as to the poetry scene.
You know, like I said, you can see from everything you do, and I've got most of your LinkedIn page, and I could be asking you questions the next hour on this. I could today. You've done so much, haven't you? Just a couple of years.
It has been a bit. Yeah, I can't really. It's just all been I think because I've had periods of my life that have been quite personally quite difficult, and I think when you've gone through that, or being close to feeling like you have nothing in a way, suddenly when you've got the opportunity to grab things, I'm so grateful for that, and to grab everything and seize everything, and not in a greedy way, but just like take your opportunities and live life to the full, because you've only got one of life.
I think that's a good point for everybody to do that. That's what I do. I do spoken label. I love meeting people, chatting to them. Your case, like you've done so much in your journalism, writing, and everything. I know you've done gigs in front of bands as well, haven't you, back in the day as well. So I've done that spoken word before, and it's an amazing feeling.
It is, and just surprising yourself. I think surprise is a key element. You know, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and just and going for it, because I've kind of got the mantra now, like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, and people tend to be, you know, there is a lot of negativity in the media, especially, you know, at the moment, but people do tend to be accommodating and friendly. You know, the sheer majority of people are decent, and I've met some, you know, you love meeting people and talking to them, and people are inspiring and they give you energy, you know.
That's why I get off people. That's why it's part of the spoken label. People like yourself who've done so much like I have. You come away with something from it.
Yeah, definitely.
It makes you want to encourage it. So, where do you see your creativity going next then? Or where would you like it to go? That's a better question.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
So I'll tell you what do you want to hear what mine is next?
I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah. I'll tell you mine first. I'm digressing a bit.
No, go for it,
I've got a book out shortly, and I'm doing it self-publishing on this, on 10-line poems maximum.
Oh, wow, that's a challenge.
It took about 2.5 years to write, because I've been writing it in between other books. It's called The Streets Wall We Could See. So there's a lot of little noir stories.
Oh, that sounds brilliant.
So that's out in March, I reckon. So then I've got the
we'll have to have a book swap.
Yeah. We'll do a book swap book. We'll sort out on that one. Because I know if you're based around here, please meet you. So
that'd be great.
I've just got the proof come through tomorrow, so
that's really exciting.
And what's good in my case is it's a space that Amanda's helped me out with, my partner. She's designed it for me, because she's a cover designer as well, the writer. So
that's a great combination. Yeah,
she did everything. So, that's what that one. And then I've got I've been writing seasonal books. I have.
Okay.
It's quite similar to your approach, where I'm looking at the season and writing about my own life in between it. So I've done one on summer.
Yeah.
I've done one in autumn. The winter one's 2/3 done now. So
that sounds really interesting.
That'll be next year's, that one. So that's my project anyway. So.
Oh wow! Well, that's food for thought. So I've got I suppose branching out and doing different things and challenging yourself. I think the Winter Hill project that I'm working on, external to my job, has kind of taken me already into new areas that I've not written which I've not written before. So I'm writing about Winter Hill in Greater Manchester, or some people would argue that it is in Lancashire because they don't like them.
I was saying it is borderline, that one, because it's
some
right on the
very
borders.
Defensive about, you know, they don't like the Greater Manchester, you know, like kind of labelling of the area.
I know an ex-friend of mine, don't speak to her anymore now. Not fell out with us either. But she moved to the flats in Winter Hill. She had an argument with the postman saying it's Oldham, and she said no, it's Manchester.
Yeah, so it is funny. But Winter Hill is fascinating, and as part of the Edgelandia project, which has been commissioned by the London-based publisher Pen in the Margins, I'm writing. It's a very wide brief. It's just a creative, artistic response to Winter Hill as an edgeland space. And so over the course of 2020, I'm walking the hill with a series of writers, members of the community, different people who are passionate about the hill, recording it, so kind of, you know, recording, and also creating photo essays, performances, you know, different kinds of work out of it. So I've been doing a lot of place-based writing, so semi-diary entries and like creative non-fiction, and that's very new to me.
It is that. So you're living in Hume as well. That's not a bit of travelling up and down there.
It is, and I don't drive, so it's a real. But then I think that invests you in place more. I have to make that physical effort, you know, to be there, to get up and run to Oxford Road Station and get the train and walk from Bolton. So.
I get 2 buses to work and one bus and train the way back in the night to do, and I love it because for me, I'm reading all the time or writing. It's that experience. I like it that way. So I could love it.
Travel is a good, you know, it's a space in itself to be creative, isn't it?
Oh yeah, completely. I suppose you go and see your family and stuff in Bacup.
Yeah.
That's some travelling.
That's a trek, yeah. My dad still lives in Bacup, my mum lives in Burnley, and my grandma, sadly my granddad died shortly before Christmas last year, but grandma still lives in Waterfoot, so you know, so it's
to go to
along the Rosendale, Burnley's not in Rosendale, but Bacup and Waterfoot are.
Something like that. Each one of them like an hour at least from where you live.
Oh
isn't
yeah,
it?
you get the Which Way bus, the aptly named Which Way, and then get off in Rottenstall, and you've either got to get a bus or trek it by walking.
Oh,
So
God,
another
yeah.
bus, so 2 buses really.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, I need it. There's no train station in Rosendale.
There
I think
isn't.
that's part of the reason why it feels a little bit isolated.
Yeah, I did a radio interview there back in last year. I did. And
Well, where did you meet?
Rosendale FM. We went down straight to the station.
Oh, did you meet Tony Edwards?
No, Paul Jenkins.
Ah, okay.
No,
I know the name.
We'll talk about that off mic. I'll put you in contact with him.
Yeah,
so you should
great.
speak to him. Right?
Yeah,
So,
brilliant.
right, if people want to find out more about you, where are they best going?
Well, I suppose they could go and visit Haunt Manchester, because there's links to me on there, and a lot of it is, I suppose, my journalism. So that's like www.visitmanchester.co.uk, like on /haunt, or if you just go on the Visit Manchester main page, and Haunt Manchester will be one of the subsections, so it's an easy click through, or just type in Haunt Manchester on Google. That's the best way, and we've got all social media channels as well. And then for me personally, I'm on Twitter, and that's probably where I'm most active. So it's at Emily V Oldfield, and also the Edgelandia project. If you just type in Edgelandia on Google, I'm on that website as well with the Winter Hill project. And I'm more than happy for people to get in touch or to follow me or whatever. I think I really like connecting with people.
Yeah, I think you always get something from it if you're a very creative person. Now, how do people get hold of your pamphlet then? Just to conclude, that's the big plug sell.
Yeah, Grit, which is out on the 1st of March, is available for pre-order now with Poetry Salzburg. The best way to pre-order is probably, I've done some tweets with links to the actual pre-order page, but if you go on the Poetry Salzburg website, Salzburg is SALZBURG, Salzburg in Austria, and it's easy to it will be on the main page because it's a very recent announcement.
Yeah. I know your editor sent the link over to me, so I'll put the link on the podcast for you. So
thank you very much.
Okay, well that's the end of the chat bit. So we'll pause the recording and let you get a few poems ready for us, Emily.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Give us all a minute, guys. See you soon.
Spoken.
Hi guys, Andy's still here with Emily, and Emily's going to do 4 poems for us today. I don't know whether these are from your pamphlet, Emily, are they?
Yes, they are.
Great. Well, can you do me a favour then? Can you introduce each piece for us? Tell them the title so I can write it down.
Yeah, will do.
And anything else you want to say about the piece, we'll start from there.
Okay. Some of these poems, which are obviously in the Grit pamphlet, are also performed as part of the Rural Eerie, which was an event as part of the Gothic Manchester Festival last year. It's amazing that Manchester has a Gothic festival, and which is informed by the Centre for Gothic Studies, and I performed it with a band called Flange Circus, who are an electronic alternative, kind of haunted electronica band.
Brilliant. Was there any recordings of this or anything?
Yeah, there are recordings of it, and we're going to hopefully, release some of that material. So, and there's videos of it online. On my social media, there will be links to that. So some of these poems were also performed as part of that over an immersive soundscape created by the band.
I'll get some links to that then. I like series. Go for it.
Okay, the first one is Bacup. Bacup. What makes mud? The chemical mix of something indecipherable has no instruction. So I go to the Irwell and plumb its depth in 2 great handfuls. Where Anglo-Saxons faced Gauls and Norsemen, I touch the turnip broad clough where earth and water form the composite mulch that moves in anger. The river is raw here, it rolls rocks to ransom, lashings of white water whipped up like an animal. Mud is a way out, it is an answer. Its tongue thick and red ripe in the rhododendron flowers rashed up overhead. Growth comes in a kind of hurt. There is a difference between mud and dirt, between dirt and silt. Here lies the flint which cuts and spills, cuts the funding from the mills, cuts the budgets of each street, cuts open lines and scores the crease where the railway was pulled up. Each wire of track and pulse of station in the slow, sinewy draw of a drain from a surgical patient. The sewer screams as it cracks, then bubbles and bursts. The charred, naked moors round here are a ritual occurrence. Mud is a salve to cover the burning. It covers the South Pennines in a sheen that lodges under Kestrel's eye. It covers cows and dogs and sheep. It covers the faces of the men who dance despite it in their clogs. The souls skid and spark the cobbled streets. It covers adolescent skin, and in the nights it screams to be held close. It covers hands and stops their reach against the headlines and their "This is all." Old English says muddy valley by a ridge. This English says post-industrial and bleak. Yet it is from here the Irwell grows, from vein to artery, a blood that bonds us in its seam. My hands, they let it run through, the reminder, mud, to make it the repeated action of stepping on earth is enough.
Fantastic. Really, really evocative of that.
Thank you very much. So that's Bacup, and where I grew up, so the town in Rosendale. And this second one is called Brock, and it's about a badger, and a badger was one of my granddad's favourite animals. And this poem is inspired by, it's quite a strange sensation. I don't know if you've ever locked eyes with an animal, a nocturnal animal, like an animal that's out during the day when it shouldn't be.
No,
And and you stare at each other, and you don't mean any harm at all, do you? You know, but there's no way of communicating that. You're just staring at each other for that moment.
Really?
And it reminded me of the sensation of like looking at my granddad in the hospice bed and feeling he couldn't communicate and feeling completely powerless, but wanting to say, I don't mean, there's nothing gonna hurt you, it's okay. So this is called Brock. Seeing a badger within daylit hours is walking in on nature preparing itself. I crouch to that mushroomy perfume, the barely perceptible burr of a pulse, my hand out in its hospital gesture. His humbugged banditry a mask, a shock of fur against pavement, the reminder of cold earth he intends to push away lingers. I look at the animal, landlocked, the suspended tension of neither of us having the language of love for that moment, nor reassurance. Apart from the silence, stillness shared like a seat at the bedside, the mutual stare.
Yeah, that's really hot. Oh, sorry, I'm making me shiver then.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Spoken, mate.
So this poem is about a hill called Wardle Hill in the Whitworth area, so the edge of Rosendale, close to Rochdale, very historic area. The local historian, who's also written a book called Lower Lines, David Chatham Barker, has written a lot about the area, and that's been very inspiring. And Wardle Hill has got so many layers of history associated with it, so I decided to use it as inspiration for this poem. Wardle. They call it breathtaking, the moments you give yourself utterly to the climb. You are on a hill in Lancashire, and your whole body fuses in getting over the last of the height. Before you, industry workers shared step with school children, dry stone wallers, sheep shearers, day drinkers. Even the hardest, learning the course of the softest tread, the adulting ritual. Generations earlier referred to the lie of the land, flourishing their fingers over imagined terrain like the conductor of an invisible orchestra, or the hand of the painter. They instill it in you to find it again. The great fib, the dishonesty, the unmentioned, the power of a lie is not the phrase, but its deception. It is the befitting option. It is the medicine scraped from soil, spun from sage of the Whitworth doctors who stepped on this hill in the centuries before us. The land where balladists battled with moorland and marram grass. The path of worrying ministers crossed wandering minstrels. You step and hear the rain sounds different, not the drum on concrete, but something surrounding, present, intimate, and your gauge reaches the horizon from the ascent, as did the grieving mother, the frustrated officer, the confused priest. The lie of the land is that it yields, for the beauty remains in who and what it receives.
Oh, excellent. Love it when you change the gear to the U on the second to last stanza there in particular. That's a really good time to change the pace
Thank
of the piece.
you very much.
It's well
I like to involve the reader or the audience, them to feel part of the place.
Yeah.
I think that's important with
I think
Rosendale.
You did there because you changed the focus and like it was from instead of me or Arnie.
Yeah.
To you, but yeah, that.
Thank you very much.
Good pace on that.
Thank you. And this last poem I'm going to read is called Waterfoot. It's where I went to school, the town in Rosendale where I went to school, went to high school. It's where my grandma Edna, my dad's mum, still lives. It's a town, a post-industrial town. It once was very populated with shoe factories, and like the Lancashire shoe and the shoe industry was quite big around those kind of mill towns like Bacup, Waterfoot, Rottenstall, and this is Waterfoot. Waterfoot, with a footprint full of water, each step is a spill, each walk is a run, with its line spooling back to the base of a hill. Cowp Law, a gritstone crust where plateaus of rock dent the door of the land. There used to be a bread factory here, felt before that. A fabric forged through touch, threaded through water, felt without feeling. Some call it numb. Here it is industry. At 13 years old, I practiced a weft of the moors, nor step the same back as at what had been before. They call it backwards, the process I learned. The monks who made it felt taught of scales on rabbit fur, their form cut in a cross only birds could survey. I learned for was an edge, and lovely a dog, not a phrase, for a cut on a scent of the law is an animal's grave, dug by the pitmen of 50 years back, crag quarry their own, a land wavering between what was and what remains. It hangs wet in the air, in the bellies of crows, strung up dead on barbed wire in slow ripening pairs, seeps into the peat in a slow wave, these dredged definitions which make this tongue rough, rare, untrained, the river that runs but does not run away. Call that my affection and my apology, my dread of the dry, of becoming stationary, for it already flakes the chapped lips of the town, the suburban estates where the clock is a god. Waterfoot, where grown men are haunted by happy childhoods, now facing parents in hospitals, no answer, the moors or moisture. They call it backwards, but in looking back, before the land rises, it tenders, proves, everything you know and love will move.
Fantastic. Great way to finish off. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with the book. And
Thank you very much.
a pleasure today. Really
It's been
enjoyed
brilliant.
it.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Well, it's like it must feel weird for you, the fact that you've been even the question thrown at you today. So you've had the question of
It does feel strange, yeah, from being a bit more used to interviewing people. It feels strange to be like in the interviewee seat, you know. But it's been a great experience.
You've
Thank you.
been great today. Really been fascinating. And this is Andy N signing out. And see you again down the line, guys.
Spoken, mate.